Thank you, Lynn. Lynn has been a good friend to me. We actually met about 5 years ago, so she's trying to age me, but I'm going to keep her in her place. And I want to thank her for this opportunity. She did not tell me that the good-looking room was over here, so I'm glad that you're here. That's right. Okay, that's right. So I'm with Swim Kids, Swim School. We're in Northern Virginia. We've got 5 locations there. I'm our business manager, which means that I actually get to wear a lot of hats. And like many of you, no 2 days are ever the same, which is why I like the job. Definitely the kids are cute and those things. I have great bosses. I love working with them, and I'm not just saying that. I really do love the people that I work with. They're fabulous. But my favorite part about my job is developing and implementing systems for our business. And we are probably like you. We're pretty highly systemized, but we're also like you. We're here because we want to improve our business and we want to grow, and we're definitely always looking at ourselves on how we can improve. So that is something I want to talk with you about today is systems. And I come to these conferences, and I always feel lucky to be here, and I get to talk with a lot of people, and we're all asking each other questions. And some of us have 5 employees, and some of us have 200 employees, and I have found that there is a common thread. This question comes up over and over, that being how to get our people to follow our systems that we've put in place, and how to get them to do things that we want them to do. Yeah, how, right? And Barnes & Noble, there's a wall of books on this topic in the business section, although I think for most of us, we would think it belongs in self-help, definitely. So I've asked myself this question, and I thought about what I was going to talk with you today, and I decided astronomy and physics. So, you knew it. So, your universe, your solar system has planets, right? Your people are your planets. They're different shapes and sizes. Some are a little warmer, some are a little colder, some move faster than others, like the planets. They all have something in common. The planets, what they have in common is their orbit around the sun, right? That is what they are all doing. They're orbiting around the sun. For those of us who grew up with 9 planets, Pluto was included in that, but right now we're at 8. So your people are your planets. You might have teams, actually, that are planets unto themselves as well. And your systems are the sun. That is what you want your people doing, is orbiting around the sun. That is your systems. So what is it about the sun that keeps people and teams orbiting around them? What is it? Does anybody know? What keeps the planets in orbit because of the sun? Gravity, science major, right here in the front row. There we go. That's right, gravity. So gravity. Now what is it, what creates gravitational pull? Is it size? So in your mind, I want you to picture a marble, right? Little marble, and a balloon, like you get at a birthday party, and think which one of those 2 objects has greater gravitational pull? Little marble, big balloon. Raise your hand if you think it's the marble. Hey, you just got an A in physics. Good job. It is. It's the marble. Actually has more gravitational pull than a balloon because a marble has more mass. It has higher density and more mass. And it's actually mass and not size that creates gravitational pull. Now, the sun is huge. I'm not disrespecting the sun. The sun is very, very big, but it's actually the mass of the sun that keeps the planets in orbit. And so gravity, simple definition for today, is that if it's got density and mass, it pulls objects towards it. If you want to find me after and talk about Einstein and Newton and that there's a little differentiation there, that's fine. I'll talk with you, and you can bring me a Diet Coke or something to do that. So, so it's mass that gives your systems the pull that they need to keep your people in orbit, your teams. So what we're going to ask ourselves today is, do your systems have the mass that they need to keep your people in orbit? So first, let's talk about what a system is. A system, of course, is anything that you need done. Do not assume that your people will just know how they should do a certain thing. If you want it done, and you want it done the way you want it done, which is what we're all asking each other, you need to systemize it. So this could go from how to clock in, how to follow the follow-up log for your customer service, how to process withdrawals, how to keep the refrigerator from not turning into a science project. Anything that you want done is a system. Raise your hand if you remember playing telephone as a kid. Do you remember at camp you played the game and you'd whisper the phrase around the circle, and it was so funny how much the phrase changed at the end of the game. That is not what you want for implementing your systems. You do not want a game of telephone. You want, because it will not be funny to you how much the process changes as the employees pass it down to each other. If you have a coach say, yeah, this is how you clock in, and we're supposed to wear a rash guard, but like, they don't do anything if you don't wear a rash guard, and da-da-da-da. That is not what you want. You want them accessing a system and using that as their frame of reference for how to be a part of your business. So absolutely, everything needs to be written down. So a good system has mass. A good system is measurable. If you don't know how to measure a system that you have in place at your business, you will never know if it is working. It's like taking water to sea. There's no point in having a system if you cannot measure it. Now, I'm not suggesting you start measuring every single little thing you're doing, but if you needed to, if you wanted to, you should have a plan for that in place. At Swim Kids, we about a year ago started to measure our graduation rates very closely, and we put measures in place at every level. We started with our coaches and our managers and our assistant managers and our general managers, and we just started to measure it. And they had little reports that they did every week, and we would talk about it about once a month, just where the numbers were. And in a year, our graduation rates improved by over 50%. 50%, which is a huge improvement for us. And we didn't change anything. We didn't change our curriculum. We didn't change what the requirements were to graduate. And I'm actually a little embarrassed to say this. We didn't even set goals. Like, we didn't tell them, hey, it's 18% this year month, let's try to get to 15. We just observed it and measured it and saw tremendous improvement. So absolutely being, yes? Yeah. That's right. We started to take the kids that had not passed or checked a skill in a certain amount of time, and we put those kids on a list. We called it our impact list, and we had some plans in place for how to address getting those kids checked off, getting them progressing in our system again. And in a year, the number of kids on that list fell by half because we started to measure how they were doing. Thank you. Actually, that's a good question. Thank you for asking that question. Yesterday, Pam talked about the phones being such a critical part of the way that your customers are trying to connect with you. If you don't know, like if you couldn't tell what your answer rates are, for example, on your phone, you need to figure out how. And it may not be what you're going to focus on this year, but again, that's a critical system in your customer service strategy. And if you have no way of measuring it, you need to think about how you could, because it could come up for you in your parents' surveys or all those things Lynn just talked about, definitely. So a few things to think about with measurability: who, how often, where will the data live? The more you can plan these things before you implement a system, the more smoothly it's going to work. Someone needs to be on point for collecting the data, maybe not the same person for analyzing the data, and you need to have that planned out. 5 managers agreeing that you're going to start tracking employee attendance is not a system, that's an idea. Right? And then 1 manager starting to actually track employee attendance and knowing their point, which is good, and reporting that once a month. That's a collection, and that's a good start. Putting that data into a spreadsheet and starting to compare month to month or week to week, or what was our employee attendance last year, that is a measure. That is a measurement. When you start having the data tell you something. And one piece of advice, not a lot of people get a lot out of spreadsheets. So when you do start to use numbers to measure your business, try to present that data visually if you can for your teams. People like graphs, they like dashboards. generally people do not like spreadsheets, and they don't know what to do with them. So that's just one little piece of advice. And know for yourself, how often are we measuring? Weekly, monthly, annually? How often are we going to talk about it? You might collect the data all year, but you might only be talking about it once at your strategic planning meeting for the rest of your year. Or you might talk about it every month, like we did with our graduation rates, because it kept it at the forefront of everybody's minds, what they were doing. So think about that. And also think about where the data is going to live. You want to make the data as accessible as possible to as many people as possible all the time. If the data is living on a piece of paper, in a binder, in one desk, at one of your facilities, no one is going to be able to get to it, and there's sometimes you need it, right? Like you're trying to decide, something comes up and it's like, well, I don't know, what was our employee attendance 3 months ago? And if you got to dig around and get it, it makes it hard to just be as agile as you need to be in your business. So think about where it's going to live. At Swim Kids, we have been migrating up to the Google Drive, which has been very powerful for us because you can get to it wherever you need, and people can have what they need to do their jobs, and it's worked really well for us. So think about where the data is going to live, and then also think how about you're going to collect it. I've definitely found that the point person, it's better if the data comes to the point person rather than the point person having to go out and try to harvest it, right? So have your people put the numbers in the spreadsheet or email it or have the data come to the point person rather than kind of sometimes what can turn into a goose chase. All right. So good systems are also accessible. This is not what you want. You do not want people to be unsure of where to find what they're supposed to be working on. If you have binders, just ask yourself, do you have binders? Is it buried in a file cabinet? If you have a dress code and you've updated your dress code and you do it at your meetings and you make sure everyone sees it, and then 2 months later nobody knows where to find it, it's not fair for you to expect them to be held accountable for this system because they can't get to it. They don't know where to find it. And you're one planet away from, or one hire away from a planet not having anything to orbit. It's just going to fly off in space. So you definitely want to think about accessibility for your systems and how everyone in your business should know where to go to access what they need to do their jobs. If they don't know where to go, then again, you cannot hold them accountable. At Swim Kids, just this last year, we've started putting all of our how-tos onto Google Sites. And we've got a couple of different sites because our coaches don't need what our office needs. They've got a couple of different levels of what they need. And it's been very powerful for us because not only can everyone get to the site, no matter where they are, we can control what version they're using, right? Like when you're sending attachments and someone, the dress code, and they download it, and then 3 years later, someone comes to their office and says, hey, are we allowed to wear high heels? And they're like, I don't know, let me open the dress code. And they've got the one that's from 3 years ago on their desktop rather than the most recent one that's on the site. So you definitely want to be thinking about version control and accessibility with your systems. A good system is also, it has to be simple. Complicated, tedious systems, I'm sure you have found this, just do not get followed. If a system is big and clumsy and it doesn't make a lot of sense, they're not going to get followed, and your people won't understand why you're asking them to do these things, and they won't do it. And you can threaten them or bribe them or try different things, but generally simplicity and clarity is what's going to keep people in orbit, right? Doing what you've asked them to do. At Swim Kids, we are working really hard on writing out our how-tos and documenting, like Jet and Pam talked about yesterday, every step. And the goal is that even a new hire, as long as they know how to read, should be able to sit with a how-to and just about get the job done, just about, and be able to follow. And we're trying to document everything, how to clock in, if we want them to do it, we're trying to write it down. And we're finding that in reviewing our systems, it's made us question a little bit some of the steps that have been in place for a long time. And we've also talked with our people. So we have a fairly detailed registration list, like most of you probably do, what we want them to do when we sign somebody up. And we were having a little frustration, there was some frustration because sometimes steps were getting missed or skipped, and that was happening more often than never, which we wanted to fix. And so we talked to them about it, and we asked them, this checklist makes sense, and you know how to read and write, and what's going on? And they were very clear with us. They didn't feel like the steps were in the right order. They said they're all there, they're just not in the right order. And we don't like using the checklist because we have to kind of jump around while we're talking to the parent, and then sometimes we forget to go back, or they get distracted, or a kid wants a hand stamp, or whatever happens, and then they've lost those steps. So we listened, and it sounds like, well, duh, but redesigning a checklist or system takes time and energy, and so we did. We reordered just that simple checklist, and it immediately, compliance with the checklist went way up, the mistakes went down, we had happier customers, and we got their buy-in because we were talking with them about it. They felt heard, they felt valued, and it was really a success for us. So and buy-in's a whole nother talk. You can talk with Dave Tonneson about buy-in. He'll talk your ear off, but it's a good topic. And so think about the steps in all of your how-tos. Do they make sense? And why are you doing them? And if you're not sure, if you can't define the purpose, consider dropping it. It reminds me of a story about the newlyweds, right? There's two newlyweds, and they're having their first Easter, and the wife is watching her husband cut the ends very carefully off his ham. He's very carefully cutting the ends of his ham. And she says, "What are you doing?" She's never seen this before. And he says, "I'm cutting the ends off the ham. That's what you do." And she has no idea what he's talking about. And she says, "Why?" And he says, because that's what my mother always did. She cut the ends off her ham, and that's what you do. So she's, oh, okay, honey. She's newlywed, very polite. So next year, she asks her mother-in-law. Mother-in-law's doing the exact same thing, cutting the ends off the ham. And she says, why are you doing that? And the mother-in-law looks at her and says, "Because my mother always cut the ends off her ham. It's a tradition. It's how we do it here in this family. If you're going to be in the family, we cut the ends off the ham." So, okay, right? So the next year, the wife finally meets Grandma, and by this time she's thinking about this. Like, should I be putting cloves in the end? Are there potatoes that are supposed to go around? And she asks Grandma, "Why do we cut the ends off the ham? Does it help the flavor? What's going on?" And the Grandma just looks at her and says, "Honey, if I didn't cut the ends off my ham for 30 years, it wouldn't have fit in the pan." Right? So you don't want that for your systems. You want to think about the steps that you're taking. Do they make sense? Do they have a purpose? And sometimes things will fall away, and you should, right? You're going to continue to evolve and grow, and that's what you want. You want to constantly be thinking about efficiency, buy-in. Is it measurable? Is it accessible? Is it simple? But most of all, is it sustainable? A good system can keep itself going because it is well thought out and it does not depend on a single person. If you have a system that depends on a person, that is not a sustainable system because people have lives, as you all know. We talked about yesterday with Lynn, preventable and unpreventable hires coming and going. People have lives. So you want your systems to be self-reliant. And when they're written down, and when they're accessible, that is what gives them sustainability. We have at Swim Kids a customer service guru who is brilliant, and we love her. And she's been doing customers. She worked for Kohl's for many years, and she's just so loving, and she's wonderful. But that's not a system. That's a great hire. So what we're working on right now is trying to get all this stuff in her head out. And it's a challenge. And I will say, trying to document something, if John has always been the one that's done your payroll, John may not be the one to write out how to do your payroll. It's not easy. Actually, we've kind of learned that the hard way. Not a lot of people can do it. They either don't really remember everything they're doing, or it's overwhelming. And so find someone that can write and knows how to ask good questions. We've found one at Swim Kids, and we have sicked her on person by person. She sits next to the people that we're trying to get documented what they're doing and asks questions and writes everything down and is drawing all these steps out. And it's worked very, very well for us. So definitely think about that when you're starting to write things out. Find someone that knows how to write and can be succinct and can also think about all the detail that goes into what you're doing. Sustainability is like the capstone of the other three. Measurability, accessibility, simplicity, everything leads to sustainability. So when you're considering how you're going to have a system work, have the system be the source. So if you're the trainer, and let's say you do have a great how-to on teaching back floats or running a baby's class or whatever, when you're training new people, use the how-to the whole time that you're training. Keep referencing the how-to. Have the how-to in front of you. Talk about where the how-to lives. Because then what you're doing is you're establishing the how-to as the source. You may not need it, right? You've got it memorized in your head. I can teach anybody how to teach a baby class. I don't need notes. But they need notes, and they don't know that yet. So if you establish the doc or the website as the how-to, they will see that as the source. And they will not think, oh, if you want to know how to run a baby's class, you need to call Lana. Or if you want to process payroll, you have to call Alexis if you have a question. Establish your systems as the source, and that will make you free to do things like this, like come to conferences and continue and grow your business. So I just want to thank you very much. I've had a chance today to talk about sustainability with systems. I like my happy planets with the people going around. You need to just think about maybe just one or two systems in your business, what's working well, what's not, and pick maybe just one or two things that you could be thinking about how to raise the game, how to raise the bar on your measurability and your accessibility, simplicity and sustainability. I've enjoyed talking with you today. Do we have time for questions, or are we? Okay. Oh, well, then I can be the bearer of a longer break for you here. Thank you very much.